This is the Carlinian Studio, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about time and time travel and prophecy and what it means for God to be all-knowing. So, most people have this idea that time is kind of on a continuum where the past, present, and the future all exist together simultaneously. Simultaneously being kind of a misnomer, but I don't have a better word for it. The basic general idea that the average person has is that the future and the past are things that exist, such that if you knew how to operate scientific, principles properly, you would actually be able to get into a machine and go to the future or go to the past. And there are some problems with this, not the least of which being that no one has actually ever made a time machine. Now, the biggest problem that this creates, which I want to address in this video, is that a lot of Christians have this idea that because God is all-knowing, that means he knows the future. Now, that idea only works if the future is a thing that can be known. If the future can't be known, God doesn't know the future. Now, of course, at this point in the conversation, most people will be like, well, God knows everything, therefore he knows the future. Okay, well, you can know everything, but that doesn't mean that you know everything, including things that can't be known. You can know everything, but that doesn't mean that you know things that don't exist. You can't have data that doesn't exist. You can't have information that does not exist. If the future doesn't exist, you can't know it. No matter how all-knowing you are, you cannot know 100% of the future if the future doesn't exist. Now, having 100% knowledge of the present and having infinite processing power, you would imagine that such a being, God, would be able to make pretty accurate predictions about what would probably happen in the future. But the key word there is probably. And however, the way how predictions work is whenever you are making a prediction, there is a cone of uncertainty such that the farther away from the present you get, the less likely it is that your prediction is going to be true. Okay? Because the information that you have right now may indicate a particular outcome in the near future, but you are going to be less and less sure of what the outcomes are going to be the more and more variables that are added over time. So even infinite knowledge of the present and infinite processing power is not going to guarantee absolute 100% foresight all the time. That's not how time works, okay? Now, someone will say, well, how does God prophesy? How are there prophecies in the Bible? Okay, those are not predictions. A prophecy is not a prediction. A prophecy is a creative action. God says in the Bible, whenever it is my word that goes out from my mouth, it will not return to me empty, but accomplish the purpose for which I sent it. Whenever a prophecy is made, it enters into time and affects the way events play out such that the prophecy is fulfilled. It is not a prediction of something that might happen, and it is not knowing the future and saying something that has already been created. Now, why do I say something that's already been created? Because if all of the future, 100% of it, in all times and all places, is fully known by God, then it must have been created by God. Because taking the model that is in the popular imagination, that time is one gigantic line of, you know, cause to effect, you know, a series of events leading into each other, then by that model, all of time would have to be created by God in its entirety at the moment of his creation of the universe. Which would mean that past, present, and future are subjective and depending on your arbitrary point of view. Therefore, an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-creating being, if he creates time as all past, present, and future at once, then he has created everything that happens in time because he's created it all from the beginning. The entire thing is a gigantic script that's been written out, okay? Now what's the problem with this? Okay? The problem with this is that if you believe that God created all of time, past, present, and future, and that the present or and past, present, and future, and that the present is just a matter of your arbitrary perspective, then there cannot be any free will. Because if God did create everything, then he created everything that happens. He's created every choice that you've made before you were even born. He's created every choice that you made before any human was born. Because he created all of time all at once. That's the only way that model can work. Now somebody will say, well, he knows what you're going to do before you do it, but it's still your choice. No. That defies reason, okay? If he knows everything 100% of the time, he's responsible for it. It has to be that way. If he knows everything in the future 100%, he's responsible for it. Because that necessitates that he created it because it's all one piece. It's all time. It's all one timeline. It doesn't come into existence one moment at a time, okay? It all comes into existence at once, which means that since he's the creator, he created the whole thing. All right? You can't create the beginning and then know everything else without creating everything else. That's not how it works. Okay? If I was to create a machine and everything that the machine did was 100% predictable to me, no one would say that that machine had anything remotely resembling free will. It might have the appearance to other people of being artificially intelligent, but if I can predict with 100% accuracy everything it doesn't have free will. I made it to do those things. Which means that in order for humans to have free will, God cannot know 100% of everything that they're going to do all the time. Okay? Being all-knowing does not give you information that doesn't exist. Being all-knowing does not give you access to data which doesn't exist. You can't know things that don't exist. You can predict the future. You can speak the future into existence by way of prophecy, but everything that happens around that prophecy that doesn't directly interfere with it is still up for debate as to what's going to happen. And even if you're all-knowing, you don't have access to information that doesn't exist. Because even if you're all-powerful, you can't do things that are intrinsically impossible. Even somebody who's all-wise doesn't have answers to questions that are unanswerable. Like C.S. Lewis would say, it's very easy to ask a question that God doesn't have the answer to because all nonsense questions are unanswerable. Is green square or round? Green doesn't have a shape, okay? You're modifying the question. You're not technically answering it. Now, It's the same principle with whether or not God can know the future. And it's the same principle with whether or not God can be evil, okay? It's intrinsically impossible for God to be good and evil at the same time. He's fully good or he's not. You cannot tell me that he is fully good and that he knows everything that is going to happen in the future. Because if he knows everything that's going to happen in the future, then he created it. And if he created it, he intended it. And if he intended it, he's responsible for it. All of it, good and evil. Therefore, I believe God is good. I cannot believe that God knows literally everything that is going to happen all the time. He cannot have absolute 100% foreknowledge. It's impossible. It doesn't make any sense. It's not impossible because God isn't that big. It's impossible because it defies logic. It is intrinsically impossible. So, this has been the Carlinian Studio, and God bless.